Dr. Jason Clemmons. We're coming to you live from the Rock Health and Wellness Center studios on Wednesday, January 17th, and live on the radio on 98.7 Walk by Faith Radio and 1420 AM Lubbock Christian Nation. So I hope you guys had a fantastic day. It's been great here at the Rock. It's nice to get a little bit of warmth in Lubbock, Texas today. It's been pretty cold, as it has been around most of the places in the United States. And but we started off frozen this morning, and we ended up in the 50s, I think. So I don't really know. I've been in the building all day long, but the people that have been reporting to me that it's a little warmer than it was this morning. So hope everybody is safe. I hope everybody's warm. Hope everybody's had a good week so I hope things are going your way. It's our book review night, and we're working through the Master and His Emissary. And so I was a little disappointed in last week's show because I was so excited about the book. I've been putting it off until the new year, and I went back and watched the show, and I was like, that was boring as heck. And so I felt bad for you guys that hung in there with me on that show. So maybe today, we'll put a little bit more life into it. Maybe we can make it a little bit better. And but we've had a couple good shows this week. We took health to church on Monday, had a really good show about worry and anxiety, and then last night we got into just equipment that we have in the office and some of the stuff, and it was kind of fun because we just went through all the stuff that we use, all the little different types of equipment. So if you missed that show and you want to know a little bit more about it, you can go back and watch that one. That was a pretty fun show to kind of give you a little bit of data about exactly the things that we use, why we use them, what we use them for. And then tomorrow night, we're going to continue that with the equipment that we use for the rehab stuff. So I think that's going to be fun as well to get into some of that stuff. We got some pretty cool stuff that we use over there in our gym and to do brain rehab and fitness. And so I think it's going to be fun to watch. And so we had a really good article last night that we reviewed as well about a 92-year-old guy that started fitness when he was 73. And that's really... it was a testimony to what you can do if you just get yourself moving. I was having a conversation with one of the docs I take care of here that got adjusted, and he was like, I tell people all the time that being dead means you're really, really, really still. Like you don't move. And he said, if you're moving, you're not dead, so keep moving. And that was a really good point. If you can get yourself to moving, you're going to be better off. And if you want to learn a little bit about that, you can go back to last night's show and you can learn about that guy that was moving. So there's a lot of wisdom that gets put into that. So I think it's a good thing. We had lots of adjustments today. We had lots of doctor's reports where we had new patients that came in. I don't know. I think there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different doctor's reports that we did today with new patients. So it was really fun to get those guys started, kind of get them mapped out in the office, get them to understand where we're going with them, what we want to do. They all had pretty good results on their first day. And so it was conversation after conversation after conversation about the same things that we talk about every night from 6 to 7 on this show. And they're missing out if they're not watching it. And if you guys are watching it, if you're going back and watching it, I hope you're really getting something from it because it is a theme that happens over and over and over again, some of the things that we talk about. So tonight, I want to see if we can kind of add some energy, have a good time with this show tonight, see if we can make it a little bit more exciting than what it's been. And it's just we're going through this book, and so the Master and His Emissary. It's a book written by Ian McGilchrist. He's a psychiatrist out of England. Very, very educated man. Has spent his lifetime dedicated to trying to figure out how this brain works, and wrote a masterpiece as far as I'm concerned. I love the book. I absolutely love the book and what it's taught me and what it did for me to bring together all of the study that I have done to try to help you be healthier. That's why I love the book. It's not it's not a romance novel. I guess it kind of is, but it's not a. I don't love the book just because I love to read and and it's just well written or whatever. It's not some story. It, I guess kind of it is too. It is kind of a story, but it's not like it's not like Yellowstone or something like that. It's not some sort of fictional book that is written that's just awesome that you love. It's a book that maps it out, and that's the thing that I want to really try to convey as we're going through the book about how it maps out what's going on in your body. That's why I'm so inspired by this book. And and when you start to take care of someone, pretty much in every profession, I think it's very common in every profession to study what is sound and what is right. Right? How is it supposed to work? Like to this day, I can go back and I can write down the defense that we ran at Texas Tech in 1997, 98, and 99. I mean, I can put it on the grease board for you, and I can tell you, I can write down exactly the way that we line up, with every person lines up, what their reads were, how that whole thing fit together, how it's supposed to fit, how everybody's supposed to do it, because you start with the way that it's supposed to work. And then in the middle of the game, the defense would give up a big play. Like Coach Goodner would know exactly who messed up. He knew the defense so well that when the other team ran a play, he knew exactly what was going to happen. He knew which person was out of their gap, which person had created who didn't take care of their assignment, and that one thing right there is what is he was able to fix the problems that went wrong because he knew so well the way that it was supposed to be. And I think if you take your car into the shop, they're going to troubleshoot it, and they're going to run through the diagnostics to see what's going wrong based on what is supposed to be right. Does that make sense? Like that is when we're analyzing something. When we took all those X-ray classes when I was in chiropractic school, where I was in school for 9 trimesters, 8 of the 9 trimesters we had some sort of X-ray class, and in that X-ray class we learned what normal was, 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 and then it was easy to say, oh, that's not normal. Now, we might not have known what it was called or what it was, but we could see it when it wasn't normal, right? And I think that's pretty close to every profession. The way, I'm sure it's the way school teachers teach kids to do math or spelling or whatever. You teach them, and then you teach them what the normal is, and you just reteach them, and then do it with repetitiveness, and do it in review, right? So the reason that I'm so enamored with this book is because what it did for me is it glued together all of the pieces that go on with the way that our bodies are supposed to work, and it helps me map out, when I'm taking care of someone, what's going wrong. And so when someone walks into the office, it gives me, when I evaluate that person, it gives me a deeper understanding of how to go about it. Because one of the big deals that we do in chiropractic that's not the same that they do in medicine is we want to know why. And I'll write this down for you, because I really do think this is a big deal, um, about how this actually works. Because if you go into something that's going on in your body if you're dealing with headaches, if you've got numbness and tingling in your hands, any of those symptoms, right? There's something that's going on. And what I want to know is I want to know why that's happening. So the study that I have been doing over these last 23 years, and coming up in March, we'll have 24 years, because March of 2000 was when I got into chiropractic. And the study that I've been doing all this time is to try to figure out, how is it supposed to work? And what Dr. McGilchrist did is he wrote a book that explains chiropractic to me better than any other chiropractic book I've ever read in my entire life. This book explains all of those things that go on, that we can now take my functional neurology education, we can take my advanced muscle integration technique education, we can take my general chiropractic degree education, and I can make more sense of it now because of this book. Because now he's taken the time to write it down and explain it. And that's the part, to me. It's not a book just to be a book. It's a masterpiece of explaining why you have acid reflux, why your digestive system is not working properly, why your reproductive system is not working properly, why is your testosterone crashed. What are you doing? Why are you eating Popeye's chicken every single day? What is going on with you? What is your craving for alcohol? Can you not drink alcohol? Right? What is going on with your plantar fasciitis? Why do you have foot pain in the bottom of your foot? Right? That's what we want to know. And so that's what we're attempting to do with the book. That's why I love the book so much. I really think that if getting into it from that perspective really helps. We went through the beginning, the introduction last week, but I want to get into chapter 1, and it's talking about the asymmetry of the brain. And look, there's some sentences in here that one of my listeners to the show, a lovely lady that I love to death, and she listens constantly to the show. She's was a little taken back by the introduction that we did last week, because there's some evolutionary conversation in here, or sentences. Okay, so what I do when I read this stuff, because I have to read this stuff to understand things, is I have to take some of those sentences and understand where, like, look, they're trying to create a base, that they're coming from somewhere, but what are they saying that's real, and what are they saying that is different, right? And maybe it's the evolutionary thought of God. Maybe God thought a little bit different when he created a bird than when he created us. And his thought of our creation was different than his thought of creating a bird. Maybe that's what they really are trying to say. There's not any concrete evidence that we'll just fight over it, is all we'll do. So you're going to have to take some of this and accept. Jesus knows that I'm reading this book. Let's just accept that. Jesus knows that I'm sitting right here in my office, and I'm coming to you tonight. And hold on, I don't know. Is it? Hang on one second, because I don't know if I lost my sound. Did it come back? Hang on. Let me make sure. Let me make sure that we're getting sound. I think we're getting sound right here. Everything seems to be, back in. Okay, sorry about that. Sorry about losing. I might have hit the wrong button just a second ago. So Susan, did you hear the whole conversation about the why when I was using the whiteboard? Did that come through just a second ago, or is that when I lost you? I'll let you see if you can answer that question, or if anybody that's watching, if you can see that. I just want to make sure that you got that information right there that made sense when I was going through the whiteboard. Anyway, we'll go on with it. If you didn't, we'll come back to it when we get to the break or something. But so we're talking about the asymmetry of the brain, right? Why do we have two hemispheres of our brain? What actually is the difference between the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere? And does that make any difference in the way that our body functions? And so he starts off the topic of the difference between the hemispheres. Their fundamental asymmetry has fascinated people for a very long time. There's been a lot of people work on this. There's been a lot of people try to figure out why do we have a right side and a left side. Greek physicians in the 3rd century held that the right hemisphere was specialized for perception and the left hemisphere for understanding, which is just is an interesting train of thought. And he goes through here in some different, there's different people over a period of 20 years. This guy collected further instances, concluded that each hemisphere on its own could support human consciousness. And therefore, we must have two minds with two brains with mental disease resulting when they are in conflict. Well, it gets kind of complicated right there to go into consciousness. And I'm not going to even attempt it on this show to get too deep into consciousness and exactly what that means and how we actually bring the world into being. So I want to just kind of skip down just a little bit and talk about the difference between the two hemispheres themselves. And there are two cerebral hemispheres. Why are there two cerebral hemispheres at all? It is true that the brain's embryological origins lie in two distinct halves, but this cannot be the answer, not only because, earlier still, the primitive hemispheres themselves arise from a single midline structure, what they call the proencephalon, at about 5 weeks of gestation. So the beginning part of your brain is starting to manifest itself right there at 5 weeks of gestation. For all those people that don't believe that you're working, you're not created in the womb or whatever. Yeah. So it's an early structure, and it starts from one structure in the midline, and then it kind of folds and wraps itself around as it's working itself through. For a long time, the function of the function of the corpus callosum, the main band of neural tissue that connects the two hemispheres at their base, was unknown. So you have a right side of your brain and you have a left side of your brain. And there's a piece of tissue that's in between those two hemispheres of your brain. And it's called the corpus callosum. And they thought for a long time that it was simply just a supportive structure. That's all that they thought it was. They didn't think that it did anything. It just was a supportive structure. But then as they studied it over longer periods of time, they started to understand it actually is, it's a big deal, right? And now we know that there is, that it is there to allow the hemispheres to communicate. The corpus callosum contains an estimated 300 to 800 million fibers connecting similar areas of either hemisphere. Think about that for a second. 300 to 800 million fibers. Yet only 2% of the cortical neurons are connected by this tract. What is more, the main purpose of the large number of these connections is actually to inhibit. And we've said it on this show multiple times. Healthy people inhibit. That's a very strong sentence right there. And if you've never heard it, I mean, we could break it down, but it's very important that you do understand it if you really want to know health, because healthy people inhibit. It means that one part of your brain is going to dampen or calm the other part of your brain down. Now, what's interesting about that is in neurology, a lot of times, whenever you actually inhibit, it allows you to do something else. So inhibiting an area of the brain actually ends up being something that creates activity in another area. That's a little bit complicated to follow, but that's what the corpus callosum, that means that you have a structure between both hemispheres, and the need of that corpus callosum is to communicate between those hemispheres right there. So Although the majority of cells projecting to the corpus callosum use the neurotransmitter glutamate, and glutamate is excitatory, there are significant populations of nerve cells that use GABA, and GABA is inhibitory. Even the excitatory fibers often terminate their neurons whose function is inhibitory. And so neural inhibition may set in a train of sequence of activity so that the result is functionally permissive. So what that means is the right side of the brain may inhibit the left side of the brain so that the right side of the brain can do what it wants to do. So same thing, the left side, back and forth, right? It doesn't mean that inhibiting keeps it from, completely stops things from happening, but it means that inhibiting is a way that we can control from one side to the next. And the reason that I tell you that is because the reason I point out that the corpus callosum even exists is because it's so important to transfer that information from the right hemisphere to the left hemisphere. It's a part of, it's a very important part of what's going on. There is things called split brain people where you actually destroy the corpus callosum, and they can get along relatively fine. They will just get stuck in certain things. They will get stuck in certain aspects that they can't move off of. That like they might get stuck on one item. Like I might get stuck on this Sharpie marker. If I see that Sharpie marker and all of a sudden my left brain, which works on details and focuses down on that Sharpie marker. If I'm a split brain person, I might get stuck on that Sharpie marker and not be able to move. I might just be enamored, and I just might be locked into it and looking at it. And now, like someone has to actually come along and move me along because I'm so focused down on one side. And that's when I don't have the ability to communicate between sides when I'm locked into one side, and that's what would cause me to lock in like that. So we're going to go to a break, and then we're going to come back on the other side of the break, and we're going to continue working on the master and his emissary. I hope you guys stick with us, and it's going to the second part is going to be very explanatory about why it's so important between the two different hemispheres. So stay with us. Okay, just some housekeeping right here. I just want to make sure you guys got that, the microphone was on, and that you could see this whole exam thing. I'll just go over it real quickly for you guys that are watching the show. When you come into the office with a symptom, when a person comes into the office with a symptom, that's the first thing that brings you, usually what brings you into the office is your symptom. Well, if you go into a medical doctor's office, they're going to go through all of their exam, x-rays, blood work, tests, and everything to give you a diagnosis. They want to know the what, right? And then from the diagnosis, that's where you get your treatment plan. Drug, surgery, or physical therapy, usually, in a medical doctor's office. When you come into a chiropractic office, I'm doing all those things because I want to know why, not what. The what is not the reason that I'm going through my exam. The reason I'm going through my exam is because I want to know why are you having that symptom in the first place. Because if we address that, then the symptom will go away and it won't keep coming back on you. So there is a difference, and that's what drives this idea of why is what drives things like this book to me. So I don't know if you guys got to hear that, but I just wanted to make sure that, because it looks like I lost my mic there for a second, and I just wanted to make sure that you understood that is the reason that this book is so important. And that's what the second half I'm going to try to get to, exactly what it means. What is going on between the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere of your brain? And when you start to see it, it might take me a week or two, but when I finally get you to understand it, when you finally see it, it's going to make so much sense. Like you're going to be able to say to yourself, oh man, like I didn't even know that was a thing. I didn't know that's why I was behaving that way. and or that's why my friend was behaving that way. One of my ladies spent the day helping one of her friends clean out a storage unit, and she said, my friend really, she has a hard time paying attention. And I was like, that's interesting. Who's her chiropractor? And she was like, she almost came with me today, but because I spoke to them on Monday at their ladies club, and she was one of the ladies that listened to me. But she was like, no, I don't want to go. I don't think I'm going to go check it out right now. But she has no idea that the reason that she can't pay attention is because that left hemisphere is not functioning properly. And the reason, why is the left hemisphere not functioning properly? Those are the things that we want to try to get to and answer. So let's get back on the show. Okay, we're back, and we're talking about the brain, and we're talking about the two sides of the brain, and why there's two different sides of the brain and what they actually do. And there's some good things to know when about actually how development works. But so I'll just read here. The next thing one notices after interhemispheric divide is the extraordinary expansion of the human frontal lobes, the most lately evolved part of the brain. Whereas the frontal lobes represent about 7% of the total brain volume, a relatively intelligent animal such as a dog. So the frontal lobes represent about 7% of a dog's brain, about 17% of lesser apes. They represent as much as 35% of human beings. Your frontal lobes represent about 35% of a human being's brain, whereas it's 7% of a dog's brain. And the frontal lobe really has a lot to do with the way that we function in a higher level. There's a lot of white matter in the cortex. White matter looks white because of a myelin sheath, and that's like the insulation that's wrapped around it, which helps things move faster. It speeds up transmission. Incidentally, there's also more white matter in the human right hemisphere than in the left. I'll point this he'll point that out later. So some of the defining features of the human condition can be traced to our ability to stand back from the world, from ourselves, and from immediacy of experience. One of the things that the frontal lobe allows us to do is see ourselves in the world, not just see inside ourselves. It gives us the ability to separate ourselves from the world a little bit. And that's going to be important when we look at how we're firing from right side to left side. Clearly, we have to inhabit the world of immediate bodily experience, the actual terrain in which we live. We have to pay attention to the terrain in which we live, but we also have to pay attention to the entire territory that we're in. And that's some of the main things where we get into what exactly is going on between the two lobes. Why is it that one side actually functions different than the other side? And there's some differences in the way that the brain is. The left hemisphere will grow in a certain part of the brain bigger. The right hemisphere will grow in certain parts of the brain bigger. The left hemisphere will grow in the back bigger. The right hemisphere will grow in the front bigger. There's differences, and it has to do with the function of the way that the hemispheres are. And I want to get over here into some of this expression about how it works. Function is reflected in volume throughout the central nervous system, in cerebrum, cerebellum, and spinal cord. A nice example, which not only illustrates the point, but suggests that the brain area in individuals may actually grow in response to use. It is the fact that the right posterior hippocampus, the area of the brain which stores complex three-dimensional maps in space, is larger in London cab drivers taxi drivers with extensive navigational experience. Now think about that for a second. They actually know that the right hemisphere, that the right posterior hippocampus of taxi drivers in London is larger because of their need to look at maps over and over and over again. Another vivid demonstration is the principle comes with the left hemisphere of songbirds, which expands during the mating season and then shrinks again once the mating season is over. Interesting, huh? The conventional explanation of the best-known anatomical asymmetry in the brain has been that since, in Aristotle's famous phrase, man is the social animal, he needs language, and language is a complicated system which requires a lot of brain space. Since it makes sense that language should be housed in one place, one hemisphere or the other was going to have to specialize in language, displacing other functions. And this is what happened to the left hemisphere, which has approximately expanded in the language region of the posterior left, the back left hemisphere, to accommodate this function. The language is what separates us from other animals. It is what gives us the power to communicate and to think. Surely it is obvious that it must have been to drive the language that caused this expansion of the left hemisphere. So the point that I'm trying to make right here is that when we use our brain will develop and grow in bigger places. Okay, and so that is that's a proposition right there that it's going to grow. Now, what we want to make sure and understand is that it moves. There's different areas of the brain. It's not just one side. Speech is on the left, but the right side of the brain actually explains language to the left side. So let's keep going. So let's get into some of these animal things, which I think is pretty cool. So if we pull back a bit from the same distinction between focused attention and open attention, we could set it apart of a broader conflict expressed as a difference in context in what the world we are inhabiting. All right, that makes no sense. On one hand, there is context, the world of me, and just as my needs as an individual competing with other individuals. On one hand, part of my brain deals with me competing with other individuals. My ability to peck that seed, pursue that rabbit, or grab that fruit. I need to use or to manipulate the world for my ends. That's why most of us are right-handed, because that's what our left hemisphere does. Our left hemisphere sees the world as me, and my left hemisphere operates my right hand. So I use my right hand to grasp things. I use my right hand to make tools. That's what's going on with my right hand. So, and that's the way that my left hemisphere sees the world. My left hemisphere sees the world from a me perspective. I have to get mine. I have to take care of me. I have to take care of mine. This is important. I've got to build this. I've got to take care of this. This is a me thing. Okay? That's the way the left hemisphere sees the world. On the other hand, I need to see myself in the broader context of the world at large, in relation to others, whether they be friend or foe. I have a need to take account of myself as a member of my social group, to see potential allies, and beyond that, to see potential mates and potential enemies. Here, I may feel myself to be part of something bigger than myself, and even existing in and through that something that is bigger than myself. The flight or flock with which I have scavenged, a breed, and roam, the pack with which I hunt, the mate and offspring that I also feed, and ultimately everything that goes on in my purview. This requires less of a willful, direct, narrow to focused attention and more of an open, receptive, widely used attention. So take that into consideration right there. The left hemisphere sees the world as me and works the tools of the things that I need to survive. But the right hemisphere sees me as a group. It sees me as being part of a social group, as needing to understand who is the enemy and who is my friend. And the way that you determine that is you determine that they're not your enemy first. You don't determine that, you don't just go into that situation. Neurologically, you don't go into that situation that everyone's my friend. That's not the way it works. Neurologically, you have to eliminate the enemy first, or you would get eaten very quickly that way. But that is what is happening in that right hemisphere. That right hemisphere gives us social context. It also gives us empathy towards other people. It also gives us the worry and the anxiety that we talked about on Monday also comes from that right hemisphere, because if it's overused and it's overactive, then what will happen is we are looking at enemies, not friends but foe. We are looking at threats constantly throughout the day. We are looking at threats all the time. The left side of the brain is not really looking so much about threats. The left side of the brain is focused. That's where you get your focused attention, and you're focusing in on one thing. And what Dr. McGilchrist says lots of times is that we have the ability to eat and not be eaten. That's why these glasses drive me nuts, is because 4 types of attention that we have are processed in the right hemisphere of the brain. But one type of attention, focused attention, is processed mainly on the left side of the brain. That is a big deal when it comes to your blood pressure. That is a really big deal when it comes to your anxiety. That is a really big deal when it comes to your digestive system, when it comes to your testosterone levels, when it comes to your addiction to sugar. Because the way that we bring the world into being is the way that the brain is working. And whichever part of the brain is dominant is the part that is the way we're going to see the world. And so if we can fire up to the right and then quickly move it to the left, there's no threat. It's quickly moving over to the left. We will identify me in the world because my right hemisphere will be working. I will have empathy for other people. I will care about other people. That's one of the things that's going on with our children today and their addictions to the phone, is and the video games. Everybody thinks the video games is the problem because of the violence on the video games. That's not the problem. The problem with the video games is that when you see people on a video game, you don't process them in your right hemisphere. You process them in your left hemisphere. They're not real. They're not real people. So you lose the empathy for the person because you're not firing your right hemisphere. That's the problem with the video game. It's that we're training the kids not to take care or have any sort of empathy for anyone else. And we see it a lot. And that's what I think is the root cause of the school shootings. I think that root cause of the school shootings, you could go back and see, first of all, how many of those kids are on some sort of antidepressant or anti-anxiety medication that jacks the whole process up of the way that their brain is firing. And the question is, why are they depressed in the first place? When they decided to go to their medical doctor, they went in and they told their medical doctor they were depressed. They had anxiety, right? They went in with their symptom of depression or anxiety. The medical doctor gave them a diagnosis and then gave them a treatment plan of drugs. Did the medical doctor ask the question, why does this child have anxiety? Because anxiety is not the normal, right? That's not the normal. You shouldn't have anxiety. That's not the normal function of a brain. Remember what Dr. Chestnut said? There's not a single study ever published to validate the concept that human beings are genetically or innately designed to develop chronic disease. And I would say that anxiety is a part of that process, me personally, because we're not designed to have anxiety that walks with us and walks with us and walks with us. We are designed to have anxiety for a short period of time, and then we kick that information over to the left hemisphere, and then we get on with our lives of working in the known, and now we communicate back and forth between the two hemispheres. There is a definite correlation between health and the way that we see the world. And we can get into some of these right here. And this is interesting stuff. So it's like why the brain may need to segregate its workings into two hemispheres. If you are a bird, in fact, you solve the conundrum of how to eat and stay alive by employing different strategies with either eye. Your right eye, left hemisphere, the right eye, driven by the left hemisphere, for getting and feeding. The left eye, the right hemisphere, for vigilant awareness of the environment. So when a bird is pecking the ground, the bird is pecking the ground. The left hemisphere uses the right eye to look for the seed, and the right hemisphere uses the left eye to look for the predator. That's why it's kind of hard to sneak up on an animal when they're eating like that. You got to get in certain situations where you can get away from that process where they can see you. Because one eye is constantly looking around to make sure that they're not going to get eaten, right? For vigilant awareness of the environment. More generally, chicks prioritize local information with the right eye, the left hemisphere, and global information with the left eye, the right hemisphere. So that's interesting that the birds can split their eyes and they can be able to do that. Many types of birds show more alarm behavior when viewing a predator with their left eye. If they can look at you with their left eye, they will show alarm behavior, because the alarm is processed in the right hemisphere. Does that make sense? They're looking at you with their left eye, which is their right brain, which processes the predator, the unknown, the threat. And if they're looking at you with that left eye, they will show more alarm behavior when looking at it with the left eye. They're better at detecting predators with the left eye and will choose to examine predators with their left eye to extent if they can have detected a predator with their right eye, they will actually turn their head as so to examine it further with the left. And it goes through, for many animals, there are biases at the population level towards, again, watching out for predators with the left eye. In marmosets, individual animals with more strongly lateralized brains are better able because of hemispheric specialization to forage and remain aware of predators. The better they have right side differences and left side differences, the better they can eat and not get eaten. It's pretty interesting. Even eventual human brains that are, for one reason or another, less lateralized than the norm appear to show global deficits. In a word, lateralization brings evolutionary advantages, particularly in carrying out dual attention tasks. As one researcher put it, asymmetry pays. So that's a big deal, right? It's a big deal to understand how you are processing, how I am processing my environment. And if I'm not processing my environment properly, then I do get into those things that I can be threatened all the time. If I'm overanalyzing my environment with my right hemisphere, and I think personally that it takes power, it takes a certain amount of voltage, it takes a certain amount of movement to get on your feet, to drive your eyes in a certain direction. I think it takes a certain amount of voltage to fire up to the right hemisphere, process your information on the right hemisphere, because you need to know if you're going to get eaten by a tiger, and quickly take the big picture to the left hemisphere through that corpus callosum to the left hemisphere where the known world exists. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to do that quickly because the quicker we can get it out of our right hemisphere, the quicker we can turn off our stress response, the quicker we get out of that fight or flight response. And the way that we see the world is whether we're going to see it specifically in a very tight, focused attention way, or we're going to see it globally, a big picture way. And the thing about the left hemisphere is it only recognizes. It doesn't cognize. That's not proper English, but you learn new things through the right hemisphere, and you just remember what you put things together on the left side. And I wrote it down like this. It's like the right side underwrites the breadth and flexibility of attention. There's 4 levels of attention. It sees things as a whole. The left side brings to bear focused attention. It's abstracted from context. It's broken into parts and then reconstructs it as a whole. It tries to take the parts and make the whole from the parts. That's what the left hemisphere will do for us. That's where you get into sentences. I had a guy one time that was trying to get a bank loan, and he called the banker to get a bank loan, and the banker was a West Texas banker, and it was right during the planting season of the farming season that the bank, all the farmers were in the bank, and he was busy. And so he called him to get the bank loan early in the week, and the banker hadn't called him back in 2 days. And so he just said, well, I guess that just means he doesn't want to do the loan. And I'm like, no, that's not what that means. That means that he's probably busy and he just hadn't got back to you yet. Well, what that person had done is they took a little piece of the world, they took a little piece of knowledge based on something that they had known from their past, based on something that their daddy might have said, or something that they might have heard on TV, or something that they might have learned from a teacher when they were a sophomore in high school. They took some sort of knowledge that they already knew, and they didn't have the big picture because they couldn't see the big picture because they were so focused in on one area that they weren't able to see the big picture, that they immediately jumped to conclusions on the left brain because they didn't understand that, like they were trying to break down the details in the left brain. They couldn't see the big picture, right? And it didn't make any sense to me then. It was 20 years ago. I don't know, 10 years ago when that happened. But at the time, I just had to say, no, just be calm, because that's not what actually happens. That's not just, he's probably busy. He's got a lot of things going on. It doesn't mean he doesn't want your business. I'm sure he wants your business. And sure enough, in a day or two, like he called him back, he got the loan, everything was fine. It all worked out just fine. The way we process our environment is between the 2 hemispheres. And we're running out of time tonight, so let's just kind of take this from a global perspective. Let's get right hemisphered with this still for a second. We see the big picture. We see that from the right hemisphere of the brain. We also deal with threats in the right hemisphere of the brain. So we got to know, are you my friend or are you my enemy? Because there's a difference in the way that we're going to behave. And there's a difference in the way I'm going to behave towards you based on those 2 things. And neurologically, there's a difference in the way that my body is actually going to respond to things based on that. If I see everything as a threat, I'm going to fire up that stress response. And when I fire up the stress response, my heart rate's going to go up, my blood pressure is going to go up, all of my digestive systems are going to go down. Everything's going to change right there. My digestion's going to shut off, my immune system's going to shut off, my reproductive system is going to shut off, my posture is going to get worse. All those things are going to happen if I spend too much time in that stress response. that fight or flight response. I'm going to be able to see global things. The world comes to me through my right hemisphere, and then I focus on things on my left hemisphere. If I get stuck in that right hemisphere and I don't transfer that information over to the left, I will not be able to focus my attention on anything. So if I don't have an attention span, if I don't have the ability to pay attention for any long period of time, if I have an ADD person or an ADHD person, then what's going on is I'm not firing that pathway properly. And now I can go into the doctor's office and they'll give me an ADD drug that has nothing to do with the pathway. All it does is disrupts the rest of the thing for the rest of the time. But if we want to control our sympathetic nervous system and we want to get ourselves over into parasympathetic rest and recover, we want to make sure that we can get out of the right brain into the left brain properly. And I think it takes a certain amount of power to do that. I think you have to have proper afferent information from your body into your brain in order to drive that pathway properly, in order to keep that upper brain healthy and keep everything down here calm. And if everything down here is not calm, then we could go back to what's going on at the top, and I can map it back out. Because I got this dadgum book finally, I can map it back out to the processing all the way back to that right upper hemisphere. And is it working the way that it's supposed to work? And so that's the show. I hope you guys got something out of that. Sorry I stumbled through some of it. I'll be back tomorrow night at 6. I hope you guys have a great evening.